Ever since the dawn of the internet, mankind has found it necessary to share their contentious opinions with others online and debate things that make the blood boil. And that's exactly what we're doing today. People love a good rant, they love hot takes, and I am nothing if not a man of the people. Plus, I needed a video where I could put some of my hottest takes together in one easy to find place. So we're gonna have some fun, we're gonna hang out, and I'll go through some of my hot takes, and then we'll read some of your guys' hot takes from the community over on Twitter and YouTube. But I'm gonna start easy with this list. I'm gonna ease us into it. We're gonna start with the, I mean, they're all pretty hot takes, but we're gonna start with my lightest one, and we're gonna work our way up to the hottest takes, and then we'll probably end with an easier one as well. My first hot take is that the Rhyuria books by Michael J. Sullivan are not that good. They have a really big fandom, people really like them, and I hate them. I do not like the Rhyuria books. You know, if you watch the podcast, then you already know this about me, but I think that the Rhyuria books are super basic. They're very akin to something like maybe like Dragonlance or something like that, which aren't bad books, but they're just not these like big epic fantasies, and like people way overhype them, and it really just gets to be a lot. I think they're also really misadvertised. A lot of times they'll show up on lists with like books about great heists and thieves and stuff. I got like 4 or 5 books in, and there was exactly 2 heists. Both of them were just like a couple pages long. They weren't like this big like thieving. They weren't like a focus of the book like you would see in something like Among Thieves or Lies of Locke Lamora or something like that. So yeah, the Rhyuria books, they're not for me. I do not understand the massive hype around them, and I especially don't understand them being put on these lists along with all these other great books about thieving and stuff. My second one, this is gonna make some people mad. I think all of these are gonna make people mad, honestly. But this one, I don't understand why the First Law trilogy is classified as grimdark. There are darker things about it. There are characters that do bad things that are morally gray and whatnot. But overall, it's set in a fairly normal fantasy world. It's not really set in a grim, dark world where everything is kind of hopeless and dreary. And I think that just because you have morally gray characters in your books, it doesn't necessarily mean that your book is grimdark. Like you can have characters that do questionable things without it being grimdark, and I feel like that's exactly where the First Law falls into. People talk about the First Law being really, really dark, and I think that they're just really referring to a couple moments that happened in that trilogy. Like, I liked the First Law. I thought it was fine, but I did not find it satisfying to my grimdark tastes, if that makes sense. Number 3, I think, and this might take some explaining, but I think that booktubers shouldn't go out of their way to bash on kind of universally beloved books like Kingkiller and even First Law. I think, you know, I'm definitely an odd man out with First Law. I think that booktubers should be really careful how they talk about some of the bigger name books that are kind of universally loved. Even something like Mistborn or Stormlight or whatever. Like, if you have a problem with those books, then maybe just keep that opinion to yourself for the most part. Like, bring it up every now and then, but don't make it something that you say all the time. And here's why. There are so many brand new readers that find these booktube channels, and they're trying to figure out, well, I liked, you know, Lord of the Rings, or I liked, you know, this thing, like what else would I like? And they're kind of coming into it for the first time. And I've seen in the comment sections and on Twitter, new readers say, oh, well, I was gonna read Kingkiller, but if you say it's bad, or I was gonna read Mistborn, but if you say it's bad, maybe I'll skip it. And it's like, no, wait, like, you will probably like Kingkiller. Like, you probably will like Mistborn. If you're someone who doesn't, you have to understand that you are kind of the odd man out, just like I'm the odd man out with the First Law trilogy. I understand that. And so I feel like there's a little bit of a responsibility to tell people, like, I didn't like Kingkiller or whatever, or Mistborn, but you probably will. Like, the likelihood of you enjoying Mistborn is very high compared to, you know, my one experience. So I just think booktubers should be more careful about some of the more universally beloved books. If, you know, I think I do lots of rant reviews. I bash stuff all the time that I don't like. And so, you know, I think that that's fine. I just think you have to be careful about what books you, or what series you do that for. And number 4, I think this is probably my hottest take that a lot of people won't agree with, and I understand that people won't necessarily agree with this, but I think that authors do owe us a completed series. And obviously, if you know anything about me, I talk a lot about Patrick Rothfuss. I know there's a lot of people that are upset with George Martin. And I think that in those situations, those authors do owe us a completed series, especially if you are an author that has become extremely successful from those series. And here's why. I think that the fandoms are the people that have made these authors successful. They have spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars sometimes, on these series. And I think that, you know, if your fandom is the group that got you to that success, got you to that amount of fame, then morally, yeah, I kind of think that you do owe them a completed series. I think you do, you know, owe them a conclusion to that thing that they have dumped so much money into. Like, I can't tell you how much money I've spent on various versions of The Lies of Locke Lamora and the Kingkiller Chronicles, like special editions and stuff like that. And then even Dresden Files. I have almost all of the Dresden Files in hardcover, and those aren't necessarily cheap. And so I would probably be pretty upset if Jim just never completed the series. And so with the community putting that much money into an author, and not only that, but like reviews, like doing good positive reviews of their books and kind of selling it to even more people, and the word of mouth, it grows so big from your community of loyal fans. And I think that as an author, yeah, you do owe your community the rest of that series. Okay, number 5 is kind of dumb, but stop taking notes and doodling in your books. The dog earring, like, I don't like it, but whatever. I'm, you know, okay, dog ear the pages if you want to dog ear the pages. But taking notes in it and drawing, dude, the people that draw pictures in their books, you're a monster. And stop taking notes in the margins. I don't know if you guys know this, but in your phone, there's an app, and it's actually called Notes, and it's for this purpose. And you can go into that app and write down your thoughts so that you don't have to do it on your page. And yeah, this is more of just like a pet peeve. I hate seeing people like draw and write in their books. There's no like real moral ground to stand, like, oh, I don't think it's like disrespectful to the book or anything. It's just kind of funny. But the one thing I will say is that if you're going to take your books into a used bookstore, make sure that you haven't written in the margins, because I got pretty spoiled one time when I had gotten a used book and went to read it, and in the margins there's just like tons of spoilers, like, oh, this connects to that and that and that. It like ruined the story for me, so thanks. But yeah, those are mine. I'm sure I'll think of some more later on and I'll put them in a future video or something. But we're going to go over to the hot takes from the community here, from Twitter and a couple comments on YouTube. We got Tom Bookbeard from Twitter saying, sprayed edges are a waste of everyone's time. Wow. Okay, where to start? So no, I don't think they are a waste of everyone's time. That is a hot take, my friend, and you are entitled to it, just like I am entitled to mine, but wow. I will say, however, that sprayed edges have become a little bit too common, and we're gonna address this with another hot take later on in this video. We got Under the Radar SFF Books saying, was that too many F's? SFF, Under the Radar SFF Books. Okay, whatever. Well, and they say, well, since you asked, I think Joe Abercrombie's First Law trilogy is just okay. Loved the standalones and sequel trilogy much more. Yeah, you're right. And then Matt Pittman saying Brandon Sanderson is great because of the quantity of his work, but not the quality. I'm still a new Sanderson reader, only 5 books in, but nothing has wowed me. So yeah, I would say, man, that's a hard one. It is a hot take, because the Sanderson fans will come after you, Matt. But I think that he's almost there. I think he's almost right. I think that, yes, Sanderson has a lot of quantity. He pumps out books really fast, but I think his quality is still good, and not necessarily for the actual, like, writing and prose of it all, but more for the amount of work that he puts into world building and the magic system, and to some extent the characters. I think that that's where he really shines. So it may not be fantastic writing as in just the way that he writes his words, but it is quality in the worlds that he builds and the magic systems that he makes, and of course, like the Sanderlanches, like the twists and just kind of the story, the baseline of the story itself. I think those are all really worth commending. But I will say that I don't completely disagree with you on that. But you say you're only 5 books in, and we may have talked about this on Twitter, but I would say get through the end of the Mistborn trilogy, because that is where you will start to be like, wow, this is really incredible. Really, really good. And then we have Mick, our 4th co-host, saying, Lord of the Rings, it ain't that good. Oh man, get ready for the hate comments from the older crowd especially. I haven't read Lord of the Rings. I liked the movies. I keep meaning to read the books, but every time I go to do so, I'm just like, there's so many good modern fantasy books that are just doing things so much better. And I guess here's another hot take for me. I think that modern fantasy is not just better, but significantly better than anything from 20 plus years ago. I think that modern fantasy is making a lot of changes and telling stories in a more unique way than they ever have been before. And I guess also the flip side of that is we're also getting a lot of kind of samey stories, which, the internet being what it is and so many people being able to produce books now, you know, you're going to get quite a few of them that are very similar, that are people that are sticking to the basics and whatnot. But I think we also got that with classic fantasy too. I think that there was a lot of tropes that people stuck to, like look at how many Lord of the Rings clones there are. Like there's so many, because that's what was selling at the time. And so I think that there's definitely trends that the industry goes through, but now where we're at right now with modern fantasy, there's never been more trends than there has in the past, if that makes sense. So like when Lord of the Rings was popular, there was like a couple major trends that people were following and writing for. And nowadays, there's a diverse span of things that people can write about. And so I think that that's maybe for the better. Okay, so then we have J.A. Gein, I think. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your last name, man. He says, a good fantasy story does not require fantastical creatures. And with this, I would say absolutely right. Yeah, I don't think a good fantasy story requires that you have dragons and stuff. Right, I think that right now dragons are really overblown. We just have way too many dragons in fantasy and stuff, and I just don't find them that fun to read besides the occasional like big dragon battle or something. But yeah, I would say I think I would agree with that it doesn't need fantastical creatures. I would even go so far as to say that a good fantasy story doesn't even need like in-your-face magical elements. One of my favorite books is We Men of Ash and Shadow, and that is a very down-to-earth, like it's almost fiction. Like there's very little magical elements besides like one little thing, and I think that is an excellent story, and it's grimdark as hell, and it matches its setting so well. I would say though that if you're gonna go more grounded with your fantasy story authors, that it needs to ooze style, because otherwise it just feels like historical fiction, or it feels like military fantasy, something very kind of boring and bland. If there's not going to be fantastical creatures, if there's not going to be a lot of magic, it's got to really ooze style with the way that the characters behave, and just the whole the vibe of the book has to be very, very cool. Then we got CJ Daly saying, not every book deserves a special edition, or if it launches with it, it's not really special. And I would agree. I would say that there's probably a little bit of special edition fatigue right now, especially when some books have like 3 or 4 different special editions. That's really annoying. A lot of the self-pub books are doing special editions, which is great, good for them, but I think that like CJ is saying, not every book needs a special edition. There are books that are obviously popular enough to require a special edition, and they deserve that. And then there's other ones where it's just like, I'm not gonna buy your special edition for this book that I just kind of liked a little bit. And then also CJ coming in with another one. He's like, y'all know other genres exist, right? La 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 la. No, I didn't know that, CJ. Here's the thing. I think that fantasy is nowadays, kind of going back to the modern fantasy that I was talking about, there's so many subgenres that almost anything can kind of fit under that umbrella, as long as it meets like a couple of requirements and kind of fits the vibe of fantasy. And so I think that, fantasy is such a popular subgenre or popular genre because it is so wide and so diverse, and there's so many other mini genres inside of it. That being said, I will say that I do read a lot of like horror and thriller, suspense, that kind of stuff. I don't go too far beyond that, but I do like to get out of the fantasy umbrella once in a while. Then we got John Douglas, friend of the show, saying, fantasy and sci-fi are one and the same. It was bookstores with separate genre designations that split them apart. Wow. John, I think that maybe you should just get off the internet for a while. Maybe just put it down, Maybe just take a little bit of a break and come back later. It might be good. No, yeah, there are clear differences between fantasy and sci-fi. Man, I would really love to hear your reasoning, John. I don't know where. I did not expect this from you. I'm disappointed. And then the last one for today, we got Mr. Roru Sori. I think this is another comment from YouTube. And he says, mainstream sci-fi and fantasy needs to be more weird and experiment a little. And I would say that, yeah, I think that that's maybe not as hot of a take as you think it is. I think that there's a lot of basic fantasy out there, like the Ryuria books, and I think that fantasy could definitely get outside that a little bit more than it has been. But I think we're seeing good strides with that in the self-pub community. Mr. Roru, sorry, I don't know if you read a lot of self-pub, but I would highly recommend it, because the cool thing about that is the self-pub authors are free from the restraints of what their publishing house is telling them to do. And so they can kind of come up with very unique ideas that wouldn't be picked up traditionally by a publishing house. And so there's a lot of really, really cool stuff out there, like We Break Immortals, We Men of Ash and Shadow, Voice of War. There's a lot of really, really unique fantasy books that you wouldn't really see anywhere else. So I highly recommend getting into self-pub if you haven't already. And if you want some recommendations for some of those fantasy books that are a little bit different than what you would normally see, just reach out to us on Twitter and I can send you a list. All right, well, those were some spicy meatballs, guys. I had a lot of fun with this. I was really, really surprised to hear what some of your hot takes are. A lot of them were really surprising and interesting, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to include everyone who reached out to us. I kind of wanted to test this out and see how it goes. If you guys enjoy this, then definitely let me know and comment with your hot takes down below here on YouTube, and maybe we'll do another one in the future. You can also reach out to us on Twitter and Discord, which are both linked in the description of this video, as well as our Patreon, where you can support the channel if you'd like to do so. We just put up some exclusive content over there, and we have some more on the way that'll be coming soon. As always, subscribing and liking helps us out a ton, so please consider doing that. I know I say that a lot, but it really, really does help us. But yeah, I had a great time, and I will see you next time on The Fantasy Files. And a big shout out to our first Night Angel tier patron, Shad Zaman. Thank you so much, man.